And today we are so happy to have as our guest Dr. Swathi. She is Dr. Varanasi-Diaz, Pharm.D, and she's an award-winning healthcare professional recognized for her trailblazing work at the forefront of personalized medicine and healthcare innovation. She earned her Doctor of Pharmacy degree from the Medical University of South Carolina, and she actually became the first pharmacist in the U.S. to complete a postdoctoral residency in integrative medicine and preventive health. After this, she founded the Integrative Health Pharmacy Residency Program, and she is also a postdoc fellowship in biotech and nutrition from my alma mater, Cornell University. So thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Swathi.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, a very good place to find her, we'll let people know as we go through it again, is Instagram, and you go Dr. Swathi, Swathi. Also, LinkedIn, you have it a little different there, but you can go to our website after the show, and we will have all these as a live link. So thank you so much for joining us today. Let's go back in time. And what made you want to become a pharmacist in the first place?
So the way that I grew up, so I grew up in New Jersey, and I grew up around a lot of different, healthcare professionals, and the people that I came across in our circles that were pharmacists, they were either entrepreneurs, like they owned their own businesses, whether that was a supplement company or it was a brick and mortar pharmacy. So to me, that sounded exciting. And then the other people that I knew, they worked in kind of more unconventional roles, whether it was in the pharmaceutical industry or otherwise. And so I was like, wow, if I go down this route, my world will just open up with opportunities. The other thing was that I knew a pharmacist growing up who really embodied the idea of food as medicine, but bridged that really beautifully with the conventional medications. And so, again, I saw this as, wow, there's so many potential opportunities out there. I was raised in a household in which, so I'm Indian by origin, and I was raised in a household in which, if we had, the sniffles, for example, my parents would think of, okay, what foods can we give our kids, but also what spices are involved? How can we think of herbs and food as medicine? And so that's what really started it all. And then as I went to pharmacy school, I just tried so many different things and different paths and found myself gravitating towards, what are the lifestyle modifications that really improve quality of life? And how can we do this in a safe and effective way, especially when, the average American is on a number of medications, prescription medications specifically. So let's say a patient is on 6 or 7 medications, but how can I come through with the understanding of these prescription medications and help patients figure out what supplements are going to improve, let's say, sleep quality, or what supplements are going to improve, like some sort of anxiety associated with public speaking. If they don't want to take the conventional method, how can I help them figure out with all the other, unconventional, so to speak, opportunities to help them, whether that's through talking about nutrition, lifestyle, movement, herbal medicine, and really anything in between.
So that's a really big explanation. But did you find, as you were learning pharmacy in the university, that was there such a focus on the historic use of plant medicine in pharmacy, or was it basically the pharmaceutical industry's story about everything and all healthcare being based on pharmaceuticals?
So actually, some of the first courses that are in the curriculum are pharmacognosy sort of courses. So thinking about the root of so many of these medication actually being from herbs or botanicals. So that, of course, sparked my interest. So there is the beginning of the curriculum, as I mentioned, has that. However, that through line does not continue through the rest of the curriculum. And the focus is really on what is FDA approved and how can this be used for patients.
And that's even within the pharmaceutical teaching.
Yes.
So that's a very limited view, and I think really a shame, because if you were to go into the historic use of pharmacy, actually until very recently, pharmacists were top herbalists.
Absolutely.
And really, that was the only drugs available were herbs. And of course, then they got into the isolation of the active constituents, then the creation of similar molecules through the wonders of chemistry. And then, of course, what I think really messed it up totally, because we're always back to money, was the fact that they could then patent those things. Well, you cannot patent an herb.
Exactly. And I agree with you that I think that we all, like, especially in the natural community, understand that, the herbs are really what started it all. And the first pharmacists, the first, physicians in the country were thinking about herbs as medicine before this new, like relatively new integration of how can we patent these and make the most money we can off of them.
Wow, that's a big statement. So you actually feel like in general, that is where medicine has moved, unfortunately. Because
I
it
think at
seems
this
that both doctors and pharmacists have had their knowledge very limited, where before they were extremely expansive.
Yes, I would agree. At this point, that really is the focus. But what is great to see is that there are more and more communities and groups of healthcare professionals that are realizing the potential in these other methods that are just as evidence-based and have been used for thousands of years across different communities, and realizing that not only are they, potentially helpful for patients, that patients are also interested in learning about them and they want to know more. So patients are challenging the healthcare professional to move forward and learn more about how they can help patients better.
So you think that the pressure for pharmacists and perhaps doctors to learn more about natural therapeutics is coming from the customers or the patients?
Yes, I think that is, if we were to do a proportion, maybe 2/3 of the healthcare professionals that I've interacted with that are interested in natural medicines are realizing that their patients want to know the answers, but they don't have the answers. And so they want to be able to add to their knowledge base to provide better patient care. And then the other 1/3 are simply just interested in it because of, either something that happened personally to them or someone in their family, and they found benefit from, let's say, a botanical therapy. And therefore, now they want to dive farther in and see how they can help their patients because they've seen a kind of N of one experience already.
I definitely agree with you. So many holistic health providers who I work with, that's really what pushed them along to the other side. The fact that they themselves or their loved ones did not get relief. And then they were tried something natural and it worked. And that kind of opened the door for them.
Absolutely.
So that's really exciting. But you were more or less interested. Why? What made you so interested in more of the natural approach?
I think it was still rooted in the way that I was raised, is that we thought of, sometimes we used over the counter, sometimes we used prescriptions, but then other times we were thinking about food or spices from an Ayurvedic medicine perspective. So it was really that full approach that got me interested in thinking about, prescriptions are one of the options, but I certainly don't think they're the only option. And I think that depending on the patient scenario and the patient's goals in their treatment, that we need to think about all of these alternatives or options for each patient. So I think that's how it started. And then as I went through the curriculum, I just noticed that there was a lot of information, that there was an opportunity to include some of this information that was not included. And so I started looking into it more myself and looking for mentors in the space to then be able to feel like I could give that whole person care where prescriptions are only part of the discussion.
Important part. What I think has become warped is the fact that it seems that most medicine is only about prescriptions. You know, when a doctor nowadays, unfortunately, it's rather gross in my opinion, they'll come into the treatment room. I became a nurse in 1973. It wasn't that way then, but now. And the doctor's across the room from the patient's on the table. And the doctor is very often spends most of their time in front of a computer looking for the correct number in order to be able to code the prescription for the condition that the patient said they had. And we're doing this in 5 to 8 minutes, no less, each patient. Instead of actually taking a deep dive with what's going on with this individual, what are the many things they could do, and then save the prescriptions maybe for a few months later, if needed, if ever. I mean, that's, of course, my bias, as my listeners know. I have never used any pharmaceutical drug, never. And my mother, who's 95, has never. And my father, never, that kind of thing. That we had conditions, my children also were in their 50s. So basically we had issues and health challenges along, 90 years of life. And we used the natural therapeutics to address them. And if that didn't work, we would have considered using a pharmaceutical. Rather than how it is now, is almost everybody is on like 5 to 10 pharmaceuticals. So it's a very different approach.
Right. And I think that is partially because of the curriculum just not being set up to provide all the possibilities. And also the way that the curriculum is set up does not, let's say, for example, I had a few classes on herbal medicines, which is more than my physician counterparts.
Oh, wait a minute. I'm just blown away to even hear that. So what you're saying, Dr. Swathi, is during your conventional training, which you became a pharmacist, you had classes on herbal medicine within that training?
So they were not required, though. They were electives.
Okay.
So if people were interested, they were able to learn more by taking this elective. And then, of course, there are over-the-counter medicine classes that are required. So, learning about things like, Aleve or, the NSAIDs, things like that. So those were required. However, yes, but for some curriculums now have these elective courses, which of course I elected to take, but that is certainly not the standard. I wish that was not the case, and I wish that they were just a part of the normal teaching. But the reason I bring that up, though, is because a lot of the time we're just, as healthcare professionals, just doing what we are told and what we're educated on. And so a lot of the change, I think, in the system needs to be with the change in the way that healthcare professionals are educated. And if they are providing opportunities to learn about herbal medicine or the importance and research on mindfulness or different types of movement and how they can benefit different types of patients, then that needs to not be an elective, but rather something that is required.
So why do you think that's the case? Since the science, I don't know if we discussed this another time, not sure if we did, but the NIH, Office of Complementary Medicine,
Yes.
is holding all kinds of phenomenal classes, and I have actually sat on that panel for the last 2 years, where what they are saying at the NIH is that evidence-based medicine, all the studies are there. We do not need one other study. We can do more studies, but we do not need at this point one other study to show that good medicine would be what you just described, where first people are assessed by a trained professional, doctors and pharmacists and nurses, and what they are given is lifestyle changes, which have to do not just say eat a good diet. It has to be very in-depth. It could be different for each person, like do an IgG food allergy panel. So you see what diet might be best for an individual. Also, actually prescribing certain kinds of exercise classes, then along with very gentle health modifiers and much safer health modifiers, such as herbs and big time homeopathics. Homeopathics are being attacked right now by the FDA, but there's actually a lawsuit against the FDA where they're going to have to drop their attack on the homeopathics, which are so amazingly effective, super cheap. So that would be a protocol. And then, of course, we will use pharmaceuticals. Very often people might need that additional support, and it might be worth the very long list of very aggressive adverse effects associated with the pharmaceuticals, which are not associated with that other group of interventions. So that would be a more logical as well as an evidence-based path towards better healthcare.
Yes, I agree. It's just right now, the way that the curriculums are set up, there's not a lot of evolution and change. And oftentimes, particularly in academia, sometimes the committees for curriculum, they don't meet, more than once a quarter. So, and if there's so many things on the list for discussion at the committee meeting, sometimes if it doesn't seem like it's time sensitive, it doesn't even get discussed for 6 months to a year. And then after it's discussed, they have to move to the next step of actually implementing the change. So even if some of the discussions are happening now, it's going to take a while to actually see some change. The other thing I will bring up is, even though a lot of the curriculum is set, each school does still kind of function in a silo where they understand they have to cover certain disease states, certain organ systems, certain classes of medications, of course. But apart from that, each school is kind of on their own to decide how they want to approach it, what professors they want to bring in, what sort of coursework they want to include. So
wait a minute, I'm going to bring up something here. Yeah,
okay.
That's true. But
yeah.
Is it or is it not true that something like a large pharmaceutical company funding the school has anything to do with the choice of curriculum?
As far as I know, no college of pharmacy in the US is at least not publicly funded. Like there's no statement out there if you Google about a specific pharmaceutical company funding a school of pharmacy. So as far as I know, that is not the case. I think it's just kind of the way that it's been done for the last few decades. And
well, that's an important thing that you're saying, the last few decades.
Yeah,
because if we look before that, even as in the 1940s and 50s, there was a lot of natural medicine taught until the pharmaceutical industry actually took over a lot of it through something called the Flexner Report.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's like a political ideation changing in the direction of pharmaceuticals. But I think it's so fantastic that someone like yourself, and it is very important to be highly trained in pharmaceuticals. That's another thing I find very sad. All pharmacists, they may not have your degree of depth of understanding about natural, but all pharmacists, pretty much, like just all nurses, you have to meet a baseline of training. So I would say most pharmacists have been through a pretty rigorous training. And yet then their job seems, what I would consider very unfulfilling if it's about basically typing labels and pouring pills into a bottle.
So that's part of it. The other part of it, though, is that the pharmacists who work in the pharmacies, they do have to evaluate every single prescription and understand, is this the right fit for the patient? And oftentimes pharmacists do have to hop on a call with the healthcare provider who wrote the script to say, I actually don't think this is the right fit, or maybe this is the wrong dose or something like that. So sometimes there is, opportunity for intervention and interaction with the interdisciplinary team or with the healthcare provider themselves. And that happens more often than you think.
Okay, so that's true. But it just seems like that whole situation has become rather warped, because in the old-fashioned pharmacies that I even remember, they actually had pharmacists who sometimes used a mortar and pestle to grind stuff up and make a unique application, sometimes combining pharmaceuticals and herbals. for specific individuals, like you said, which seems like it would be much more satisfying for the pharmacist.
Yes, and there are still some pharmacies out there. The modern equivalent or the in the last, 10, 15, 20 years, equivalent of that would be like a compounding pharmacy. But at the end of the day, most compounding pharmacies are not integrating herbal medicine, though.
So that's interesting, but unfortunately, the compounding pharmacies seem to be quite a bit under attack by the
Yes.
regulating. Why do you think that's true?
I think because I don't want to speak for all of the compounding pharmacies, but I do think that a lot of compounding pharmacies are trying to do the best that they can. And with especially the GLP-1 agonist kind of boom right now, I think there's a lot of people interested in getting into that space and providing that for patients. And so there's been, I think, some recent oversight with the way that some compounding pharmacies have been functioning, just simply because of the demand of the patients right now.
Well, thank you, Dr. Swasey. We're going to take a little break right here on The Natural Nurse and Dr. Z. And when we come back, we're going to continue our discussion with Dr. Swathi Varanasi-Diaz, Pharm.D. And we're back with more right here on The Natural Nurse and Dr. Z. You can find out more by going to naturalnurse.com. If you go to events, you will be able to sign up for our many, both in-person and online interactions. You can email us there, you can call us, and you can also take advantage of the thousands of pages of free articles and information that we have there. You can always listen to our podcasts on any venue. We have thousands of those posted as well, and our YouTube channel at Natural Alternatives. So you can find everything and links to everything by going to naturalnurse.com. You can also sign up for our newsletter and look at our many books. We've written about 18 books. So all kinds of information is right there for you at naturalnurse.com. Today, we are talking to our guest, Dr. Swathi, Pharm.D., and she has been giving us a background in training of pharmacists. And so, of course, she is the best person to talk to about something that is all the rage right now. And that would be called GLP-1 inhibitors. So let's talk about those, Dr. Swathi. What about the fact that, does everybody know what those are? They've heard of things like, and you'll tell us what. So come on back on and let's talk about them.
Sure. Yeah. So I can dive right into it. So GLP-1 agonists are glucagon-like peptide-1 receptor agonists is the fancy long term, but we can just refer to them as GLP-1 agonists. They are a medication, they are a class of medications rather, that are used primarily for managing type 2 diabetes and more recently also for weight loss. So these drugs mimic the action of GLP-1, which is a hormone that we have naturally occurring in our body that plays a key role in glucose metabolism and appetite regulation. So initially when they were researched for, how can this be beneficial for patients with type 2 diabetes in managing blood sugar and insulin. But then later they found that a lot of these patients were losing up to 15% or actually even more of their body weight. And so once they looked closer into the mechanism and the potential benefits, they realized, okay, we can actually potentially use this drug class for weight loss as well.
So explain a little bit about what is a GLP-1. You named what it is, but what does that have to do with metabolism? Why would that have anything to do with someone losing weight?
Yeah, so GLP-1 is a hormone that's naturally released by the intestines after eating. And so, because it's a part of naturally what we do, and that has been studied for quite a while, the thought was, okay, why don't we create this pharmaceutical drug that actually mimics the same notion that GLP-1 already is doing in the body. So it stimulates insulin release. So this means that GLP-1 enhances the insulin secretion from the pancreas in response to the rising blood glucose levels after we eat. And rising blood glucose levels after we eat is very normal. So, GLP-1 functions as a way to counteract that by releasing insulin from the pancreas. The next thing is that it suppresses glucagon secretion. So when you reduce glucagon, glucagon normally increases blood pressure, that GLP-1 actually helps to lower blood glucose. So these two actions together, stimulating insulin and suppressing glucagon, really helps the functionality of GLP-1. Also, GLP-1 increases feelings of fullness because it slows the time with which food is emptied from the stomach. And so if you're feeling fuller, likely you are going to eat less. And so that also helps with the entire kind of weight loss mechanism. And then the other thing is that GLP-1 acts on the appetite centers in the brain to reduce hunger. And so this can also lead to reduced calorie intake. So GLP-1 kind of approaches this weight loss discussion from a lot of different methods.
And they worked on this pharmaceutical, not so much about it being a weight loss drug. Is that correct? It was more developed for diabetes.
Exactly. Yeah. So it was initially FDA approved for type 2 diabetes. And even if you look at the FDA approval, it's not for everyone with type 2 diabetes. So it is not first line therapy, which means if you are diagnosed with type 2 diabetes tomorrow, you are not going to be put on a GLP-1 agonist on its own. Instead, you are going to be put on metformin. That's the first line. And once you've taken the maximum dose of metformin, that's when your healthcare provider will assess what other medications can we add, because metformin is not working well enough as a single agent to control your blood glucose. And so that's when this medication would be in play. Also, this medication is only FDA approved for type 2 diabetes, so specifically Ozempic or semaglutide. It's only FDA approved if you have a BMI of over 27, which is considered overweight. And if you have that 27 plus some sort of other chronic disease that can influence type 2 diabetes, or if you have a BMI of 30, which is considered obese. And so if you have either of those BMIs plus the extra parameters, you're able to, be approved, and therefore your insurance will cover it. One of the issues with the medication right now is just this rampant off-label use where people are being prescribed it, but they don't actually fit into those subcategories.
My God. So I'm seeing just that, let's say, if you watch TV for half an hour, there will be ads for places that you can call 800 numbers and apparently get this. I don't know if you're getting the actual pharmaceutical or something like it, or where that's made, or, what is all that about?
Yes, so there are so many new companies that have come up in the last few years that are saying, oh, we'll make the access so easy for you and the price will be so low, because if you're just going to a conventional healthcare provider and you're not actually FDA approved and your insurance doesn't cover it, it can be thousands of dollars a month to get these medications. And so that's why a lot of these companies are coming up to help provide access, because there is the demand from patients wanting a quick fix solution to their weight loss issues or their weight management in general, and they want to lose weight. And so the issue with some of these is that they might be providing the branded medication. So again, there's Ozempic, there's also Wegovy, there's Mounjaro, there's a lot of different branded medications. But a lot of what these companies are actually doing is they're providing a compounded version of the same active ingredient, and maybe they add a little bit of B12 or they add a little bit of something extra so that they're not actually infringing on the patent itself.
Oh,
And
that's interesting. That's very interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and they're
That's
actually
very
selling it for
interesting.
much lower prices.
Right.
Which
So
is why it's
so
not
they're
thousands.
breaking that patent by changing the formula
Correct.
slightly. But do we know that these off-brand, smaller pharmaceutical manufacturers are like safe from a GMP level?
We don't know. That's the thing. Most of these companies, I actually work for a company reviewing some of these platforms, and a lot of them don't even put, where the drug is manufactured. Some of them do say US pharmacies, like it's some big win, but then other companies that don't say it, it makes me wonder, where are they manufacturing these? Do they even have a pharmacist or someone on staff who understands what it takes to compound these medications correctly? And then also some of them are just touting these really unrealistic benefits of that there's no way can be founded in reality. Like I recently reviewed one that was you can lose up to 40% of your body weight. I was like, that is just fully unrealistic. And I have not seen any study that demonstrates that the average weight loss with a GLP-1 agonist is 40%.
So that is very interesting. So we don't know where those things are coming from. And certainly it does seem like, because I'm just looking at regular people I know, and I can tell who's taking this drug because it definitely seems to work. I mean, they go down 2 or 3 sizes in clothing pretty quickly.
So that's the thing. It does work, and people are seeing that around them that it's working for other people. But what is oftentimes lost in the discussion is, what are some of these side effects or short-term or long-term impacts of taking this medication? Like what sort of, behind closed doors, what issues are they having with their stomach, with their gastrointestinal issues like nausea and
Well,
vomiting,
why don't you tell us?
constipation,
That's really,
diarrhea?
yes, they don't shout out about that. They say
Mhm.
very few side effects. So,
Yeah.
and what about long term? I mean, this hasn't even been used long term. And what
So
about that
that's
they're giving it children now?
Exactly. So that's the thing is we actually don't have a lot of long-term data just because the drug is so relatively new. But what we do know from the research that has been done to get it FDA approved is that some of the red flags associated with these medications or side effects, as I briefly mentioned, the GI issues. So a lot of patients who stop taking it prematurely, it's because of the nausea, vomiting, constipation, diarrhea issues that people are not talking about because it's not as exciting as saying you drop 3 dress sizes to say, oh, but I'm nauseous every day and I am, chronically constipated. So that's just not as exciting. So that's one of them. The second one is the mental health side effects. So,
Oh, that's
when you're
big.
losing so much weight, how is that impacting your mental health? How are you dealing with that? And also if we are, if we're impacting the appetite and satiety center, that's very close to the dopaminergic center as well. And so it's possible too that people are not feeling the same level of like excitement and bliss and happiness from some of the things that they're doing on the regular because we're dampening that center. And then the third one is the accelerated muscle loss. So of course we see people drop, their dress sizes, for example, but this weight loss is actually a combination of fat and muscle loss. And both of us know, the importance of muscle and longevity.
That's right. So there's muscle loss as well as fat loss. So
Right.
does that happen as a side effect or is that actually one of the effects?
So I think that the goal of the medication or someone taking it, they want to lose the weight. And I think they're not thinking about, what sort of weight am I losing? Because they're just on this path to wanting to look slimmer, feel slimmer. But if we're thinking about how it's going to impact your full body, again, from this whole person integrative approach, we can't just be taking something as a one and done and not realizing how it's impacting all these other systems. And we need to figure out ways that we can support the systems as we're taking these medications.
That's true. Well, we're going to take another short break here so that our wonderful station, which is Progressive Radio Network, prn.live, can tell you all about more things that are happening here. And when we come back, I would like to talk about a website that you are associated with, Dr. Swathi, which is MYOS MD.com. And if any of our listeners want to visit it, we'll have a direct link. And I'll be visiting while we talk, so you can tell us what kinds of things are available there, which might be a more natural approach rather than, jumping on the take this drug bandwagon. So we'll take a little break right here, and we will be right back with more right here on The Natural Nurse and Dr. Z. Welcome back to more right here on The Natural Nurse and Dr. Z on Progressive Radio Network. And we also are on Natural Alternatives, WUSB, all kinds of other stations we also touch base with to provide great information in natural medicine today. We are so happy to have on board our guest, Dr. Swathi, who is a Pharm.D, very, very knowledgeable person, and you can find more about her at Instagram.com, Dr. Swathi, and also LinkedIn, Swathi, and I won't go into her last name there because you just have to go to the archive of our show after we're done today, and you'll be able to just click the links. So we're going to visit the website that you give as your website, Dr. Swathi, which is MYOS MD. What does that mean, MYOS?
So MYOS MD is a company for which I serve as a medical advisor. And so it's an HCP exclusive supplement, which means if a patient is interested in using it, they have to speak with their healthcare provider to get it. And they create a product called Fortotropin. Fortotropin is a natural compound that is derived from raw fertilized egg yolk. And what I found so impressive about it from the beginning was just the number of clinical trials that have already been done on Fortotropin. And one of the studies in an RCT, so a randomized controlled trial, it showed that it boosted muscle protein synthesis by 18% in adults who are not exercising. And so this is why, when I'm thinking of as an integrative pharmacist from a whole person perspective, if someone is on a GLP-1 agonist, what can they do to help preserve their muscle as they're taking this GLP-1? And so I always think about what supplements they could be taking, like MYOS MD, omega-3 fatty acids, branched chain amino acids like leucine, and also if they're not getting enough protein, then also what sort of clean protein powder can they be consuming? And of course, all of these supplements have to be used in collaboration with a healthy diet. So thinking about a plant-rich nutritious diet, as well as movement that includes either, aerobic exercise, so thinking about walking, as well as strength training, and, how mindfulness also plays such a key role in such a dramatic change oftentimes with people taking these medications.
So bottom line is millions of people are now taking this GLP-1 drug, usually for weight loss. And I know when you call these like online 800 numbers, you're not really sure exactly what you're getting. There might be some good players. There might be some very dangerous bad players. By the time they are caught up with, you could have taken something that's, not necessarily even made in a GLP facility. Who knows? Either way, once people are getting the weight loss, they're happy about that. But you're focusing on the fact that just as always, that quick weight loss thing comes with complications.
Correct. And that's why if you are interested in taking these GLP-1 agonists, it's all about thinking about how this is one part of the puzzle. This is one piece of the puzzle of taking this GLP-1, but what can you do in addition to support the way the GLP-1 is working, but also ensure that we're thinking about muscle health and we're thinking about longevity for the future.
So in terms of a GLP-1, what does that have to do with mental health?
Yes. So GLP-1s and mental health is a great topic. And it's honestly something that I want to hear people talking about more. And so I mentioned a little bit about it briefly, but with the use of GLP-1s, people have noticed that, there has been So GLP-1 is a hormone. And so just as different hormones fluctuate in our body, if we're increasing the amount of GLP-1 or the function of GLP-1 in the body, that actually we can see that there are some mood swings associated with it. And so, if people are having mood swings, that's really going to impact their quality of life. And that is something that I'm very passionate about, is how can we improve people's quality of life? And so with that, that's part of it. And also with the change that your body is undergoing, I think it's really important that mindfulness play a role, whether that's, consulting with someone externally from like a therapist perspective to understand the changes that your body is going to undertake and what that's going to mean for you. And so I think that mental health just plays such a big role in the way that we view ourselves and the way that other people view us.
So are there specific mental health challenges that might actually be caused by the drug, or is it actually linked to this whole, change of body perception because suddenly you're losing weight?
Yes. So part of it, yes, is the mental perception component. But the other thing is the mood swings, and that feeling of like detachment or like not like low motivation or excitement. I mentioned this briefly, but the satiety center is very closely tied with the dopaminergic center. So the dopaminergic center is all about reward and feeling excitement about doing something. And so that's why some of the time, like when we're eating, we might get so much satisfaction and excitement out of something that we're eating. And if we're dampening this center and we're just, saying like, okay, we all of a sudden feel full from taking this medication, then unfortunately that can also result in the dampening of excitement towards, things that used to bring us joy, like eating or, exploring different cuisines for some people.
Right. I would say, one of the things I've always noticed just for myself is like I'm just so uninterested in food. And, I never did gain weight, never lost weight, had kids, stayed the same pants the day I gave birth to them. It was just never a personal challenge. But I always thought it might have to do with like, I'm not at all interested in food. Like I eat it. I prefer to eat healthy food. I'm not interested in what it tastes like, looks like, smells like. I don't like going out to eat. I like the nice part of sitting and talking to friends. So I usually eat my good, healthy food at home before I go out to eat. I definitely eat my good, healthy food at home before I go to any of these big, Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner kind of things. And it just kind of stays the same. So I think a lot of that psychology is linked in with that overeating in the first place.
Right, exactly. And I think you demonstrate a great point that it is all about a personalized approach. And just because I'm making, these statements, they might not apply to every single person, but I'm just basing it off what has been researched thus far. But every person needs to make a decision that really suits their lifestyle and what is going to fit them the best. And if they think with the collaboration of their healthcare provider that they would like to go down the path of taking a GLP-1 agonist, that we really need the ongoing monitoring of how are these different aspects changing and how can we help preserve muscle, preserve our, mental health, and, think about aging powerfully.
That's where the MYOS MD site comes in.
Yes. Mhm.
With that, I never even heard of that particular supplement. It's funny to me, it actually looks like powdered eggs
It
because they
is.
show
So
a
it is
picture of
powdered.
it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it's looks like an egg. It's yellow like an egg yolk.
Yeah, so it's raw fertilized egg yolk. So it looks exactly what it is because it's one ingredient.
Oh, okay. So is there any reason that people should not just perhaps eat eggs or egg yolks?
So this product itself is raw fertilized egg yolk. So when we're picking up eggs at the grocery store, they are, likely if we're picking them up raw, we are going to be cooking them, so you don't get the same exact benefit. And then of course the eggs that we're picking up at the grocery store are not fertilized as well. So it is a bit different. So I would definitely recommend this particular formulation. And it's not just for patients who are on GLP-1 agonists, it's also for anyone who's who's looking, whether it's a biohacking perspective or just a long-term health perspective of continuing to support our muscle health.
Well, it has been wonderful to speak with you, and I'm so happy that we were able to have you on as our guest, and you were honored as one of the 50 most influential leaders in pharmacy recently. So it's a real honor to have you here, and great that you're in the field. People can contact you. Instagram, go to Dr. Swathi. It's a good place to find you. And thank you so much for being our guest today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you, listeners, for tuning in once again to another edition of The Natural Nurse and Dr. Z. We love to hear from you. Go to naturalnurse.com. You can email us, call us, and tell us what you'd like to hear about, or what you don't like. That's okay, too. And until next time, this is Ellen Kamlite, The Natural Nurse, and hoping that you stay healthy.